In this video, I'm going to talk about how to take Cornell Notes. Now, Cornell Notes are a specific type of note-taking which was created at Cornell University, and what it is not just good for note-taking, but also good for revision. So when you're making Cornell Notes, what you need to do is divide your page into 4 sections. So the top title section, a notes column, which takes up about 2/3 of the middle of the page, a Q column, and the summary section. When you're reading or watching your study material, the only place that you'll use is the notes section, and this will start to take notes about the key things that you hear. Don't worry too much about what you put here, but try to bullet point it. Once you finish reading or watching your study material, you'll then go back to the Q column, and here you're putting key questions, so retrieval questions, which will be good for revision that you can test yourself on, and also vocabulary. Finally, in the summary section, this you'll come back to a few days later, so don't do this immediately. Come back maybe before the next piece of study material you're looking at, and fill this section in then. Here's a video of this in action then, so you can see that I've written the title, where I found the piece. This was a Massillip video on Adam and Eve's argument, and I've started taking bullet point notes. You can see that I use capitals and arrows to delineate where the argument's going, and just making general notes as you normally would. This question column is the best column in my opinion. So you can see that I'm adding in a question there. What is the function of Adam and Eve's argument? And then I'm rereading as I go to think about what the key questions are. If I were to reflect back on this, what questions would I need to answer? Now, my iPad ran out of battery at this point, so it doesn't show me adding in the key vocabulary, but as I was rereading this straight away after I made the notes, I was also adding in key vocabulary to this column that you'll see in a second. Now, so you can see the vocabulary there. What you'll do then, this is a couple of days later, you'll come back to this, and this is an example of me quizzing myself on this. So I'm asking myself, what is the function of Adam and Eve's argument, answering it in my head, and then rereading those sections. And I started off quite well, but you can see in a bit, there are a few bits that I missed. So this is where I'm adding in highlighted bits as to what I missed. Now, the summary box is probably the hardest one because you're trying to summarise everything that you've learned in what could be a 15-20 minute video into just small boxes. And again, this is an important part of revision because you're trying to distill this into the key information. And at the front of my notebook, I just have a contents page. In that example I just showed you, I separated my summaries into AA1 and AA3, and you can see that I've done the same here. Obviously in this part of the paper, AA3 is the dominant assessment objective, which is why I've put the most priority into that. But I have done my summary section in different ways depending on the material that I've been reading. In this example here, I summarised on the left-hand side. This was about revenge tragedies and introductions, so I summarised the key characteristics, and then you can see on the right, I looked at the 4 key plays this podcast mentioned and summarised their characteristics and how they are similar to the text that I'd be studying, and then just bullet pointed some of the other plays because they weren't quite as relevant. Those examples I've showed you have been ones that I've written by hand, but you can see that you can still use the same technique if you're doing it online. So that was my Typability app that I use on my iPad. But if you're typing things, you could just divide your Word document into those 4 text boxes. But hopefully you can see how this method is really useful for revision, given that you can use those questions as your key revision questions, kind of like a cue card, but you just cover up that information in your notes section and use the questions to test yourself. You've got the summaries, so if you're trying to have a quick look for a piece of information, you can't remember where you learned about monistic philosophy, you can have a skim of those keywords down the side or have a skim of the summaries. And it's just a really, really effective not only note-taking tool, but also a revision tool.